we have a major update that signals disaster for Donald Trump. So just to lay some background here, in the immediate aftermath of Taylor Swift coming out and endorsing Kamala Harris, the General Services Administration announced that her custom voter registration link for vote.gov drew over 300,000 people in about 12 hours. Well, that wasn't exactly the end of the story. It turns out that by the end of the 24-hour life cycle of her Instagram story on which the registration link was posted, Taylor Swift's URL was responsible for sending 405,000 people to the voter registration site. For comparison, prior to her endorsement, vote.gov was welcoming about 30,000 visitors per day. So yeah, just a casual 1,250% increase. In fact, Taylor's bump is so consequential that it's being called the Swift effect.
What are you seeing from Taylor Swift in her endorsement, especially in terms of driving civic participation?
Yeah, so I think this is a question a lot of us had after we saw the endorsement. I think a lot of people expected it was coming, but the question of how much of an impact will she have beyond just the excitement, the likes on Instagram, will it translate into voter registration? So we can see some of the back-end data in terms of the data that is coming and hitting off the voter file that we build. And what we saw was this really massive increase. We're calling it the Swift effect now because it's really unlike anything I've seen. We're seeing a 400 or 500% increase in people coming and trying to register to vote immediately following the debate and in that period after Taylor Swift posted on Instagram. And what's really remarkable about that is usually you'll see these increases and they kind of fade away. In this case, we've seen it continue through the last 2 days into today.
How so?
Well, I'm told, I have 2 teenage daughters, that she was on the Video Music Awards on MTV last night. Apparently, she put out another pitch for people to register to vote. And so we're seeing this continued spike of 4 or 5 times what you would regularly see. So we're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 9,000 to 10,000 people per hour just hitting our system. That's not indicative of everything, but it's a lot of it.
All of which would be bad enough for Donald Trump unto itself. The fact that Taylor has drawn so many people to get registered to vote, coupled with an endorsement of Kamala Harris that pulled no punches against Trump and Vance. But here's the worst part. She isn't done yet. Here's what she just said on stage at the VMAs.
To the fans, I'm always trying to figure out a way to say thank you to you for making my life what it is, for making the Eras Tour what it has become, for making the Tortured Poets Department what it has become. That's all you guys for doing that and for voting for this award. So thank you to MTV for giving me this opportunity to thank the fans, to thank you for what you've done. And the fact that this is a fan-voted award and you voted for this, I appreciate it so much. And if you are over 18, please register to vote for something else that's very important coming up, the 2024 presidential election. I love you all so much. Thank you for this moment.
I can guarantee you that in the coming days, we will look back at the staggering 405,000 people who already visited vote.gov, and that number will seem quaint. I wouldn't be surprised if by the next week, 750,000 Americans visited the site, and some massive fraction of that actually got themselves registered to vote. And just as a quick aside, you might remember that in response to Taylor's endorsement of Kamala in the first place, Trump came out and said this.
Out of nowhere, after the debate last night, Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris. What do you think?
Well, I actually like Mrs. I actually like Mrs. Mahomes much better, if you want to know the truth. She's a big Trump fan. I was not a Taylor Swift fan. It was just a question of time. She couldn't. You couldn't possibly endorse Biden. You look at Biden, you couldn't possibly endorse him. But she's a very liberal person. She seems to always endorse a Democrat. And she'll probably pay a price for it in the marketplace.
That Taylor Swift will, quote, pay a price for it in the marketplace. That was on Wednesday. By Thursday, 1 day later, Taylor went to the Video Music Awards and took home the most statues with 7 and broke the record for most wins by any solo artist in history with 30. So yeah, perhaps Donald Trump doesn't have his finger on the pulse of the marketplace to quite the degree he had thought. And in a way, Taylor exposed the same thing that Kamala did, that Trump is weak. He wants nothing more than to frame himself as strong, and yet since the moment she entered this race, Kamala has looked leagues stronger than Trump. She even had him waffling for days and days about whether he would even do a debate at all. And in Trump's defense, that was the one instance where his gut reaction not to do the debate probably would have been smart. And now Trump has issued some vague little thread about how Taylor Swift, the biggest star on the face of the earth, is going to be damaged for abandoning him, and instead, Taylor wins a record-setting haul of awards and sends more people to register to vote than at any other point in living memory. To claim that Donald Trump's strength, influence, and self-control are all waning would be the understatement of the century. Now, if Trump had any sense, he'd probably stop going head-to-head with women who are more popular, more influential, and more powerful than him. He'd probably cut his losses and save himself the embarrassment. But if there is one thing that we know about Donald Trump, it's his inability to accept defeat. And so you should all fully expect this feud with Taylor Swift to continue, which means that we may not have even seen the last voter registration link coupled with some not-so-kind words about Donald Trump. And considering she's got enough sway to single-handedly register enough voters to swing entire states from red to blue, that's not exactly what I'd call a smart move by Trump. But then again, most of his moves aren't. And finally, for posterity, if you haven't yet read the endorsement, here it is read aloud by Rachel Maddow.
Like many of you, I watched the debate tonight. If you haven't already, now is a great time to do your research on the issues at hand and the stances these candidates take on the topics that matter to you the most. As a voter, I make sure to watch and read everything I can about their proposed policies and plans for this country. Recently, I was made aware that AI of me, quote me, falsely endorsing Donald Trump's presidential run was posted to his site. It really conjured up my fears around AI and the dangers of spreading misinformation. It brought me to the conclusion that I need to be very transparent about my actual plans for this election as a voter. The simplest way to combat misinformation is with the truth. Then she says, quote, I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. I think she is a steady-handed, gifted leader, and I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we're led by calm and not chaos. I was so heartened and impressed by her selection of running mate Tim Walz, who has been standing up for LGBTQ plus rights, IVF, and a woman's right to her own body for decades. I've done my research, and I've made my choice. Your research is all yours to do, and the choice is yours to make. I also want to say, especially to first-time voters, remember that in order to vote, you have to be registered. I also find it's much easier to vote early. I will link where to register and find early voting dates and info in my story. With love and hope, Taylor Swift, signed Childless Cat Lady.
All those things, I am incredibly grateful, first of all, to Taylor Swift. I say that also as a cat owner, a fellow cat owner. Look, Swifties, you heard it. We know that it's there. That was eloquent.
Before you go, just a quick note, if you'd like to see more of my content, which is always free of advertising, sponsorships, and paywalls, please make sure to subscribe to this channel using the subscribe button right here on the screen. And if you'd like to support my work even further, you can grab a copy of my instant #1 New York Times selling book, Shameless, available for sale right now. That link is also on the screen. Thanks so much for watching.